Hello, everybody. Hello, Brett. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Frank?
Perfect. So we are in a new episode of our Community Open Hours. I'm just checking that we are streaming correctly to LinkedIn, YouTube, um, Twitch, and uh, probably Twitter. I cannot see it, but we should. And if anyone wants to say hello, comment, have questions on the chat, we will have a guest today with a special topic running MongoDB applications on Postgres or Yugabyte. And so before that, we have some highlights about what happened in the past weeks. I think we had 3 weeks. Usually we do every 2 weeks. I think we skipped one. One reason was that I was in New York for the Postgres conference. And so share my screen first, talking about conferences. It's a bit lagging on my side, but should
I
work.
see it now.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can see it now.
So we have a conference that is run by Yugabyte. That is the Distributed SQL Summit. We do it online, but we do it also physical just before. So you can register for the whole day. If you go to KubeCon, you can spend one more day there with the speakers from Yugabyte. We have speakers from other companies. We have also customer cases. That's always really nice to get feedback from the users running Yugabyte in production. We have also some workshops. Brett, do you want to explain quickly which workshop you are running? I'm trying to find it there.
Sure. Yeah, I was between two options, between either teaching people how to migrate applications a little bit more intelligently, or doing an AI agent workshop. And naturally, everyone wants the AI nowadays. So I'm going to be doing an AI workshop, just building an application live and just progressively adding more functionality to the application, winding up with an AI agent that can actually book travel reservations on behalf of a user without any manual intervention on the part of the user. So it's actually an autonomous agent that we will be building. So that will be a 2-hour long workshop, and I know you are doing one as well for the SQL nerds in our community here.
Yes, one about indexing, because that's a topic that is always there. We
Of
build
course.
application, we create tables, and we have to create some indexes, and that's not always easy. So the idea of the workshop is to bring some concepts to break this idea that you look at a column, you index it. It's more looking at the queries, at the access patterns. And yeah, we'll try to do something quite interactive with examples, because all cases are different. So my goal is more to do some cases to get the concepts that can be applied to others.
And
So
will
that's
you be explaining things in terms of how performance would be impacted on a single node Postgres database as well as Yugabyte as well, or?
actually, all those concepts work the same on all databases. I will do my demo on Yugabyte. It
Uh-huh.
works the same on Postgres, but
Mhm.
it's really the principle of the indexes and B-tree indexes that we can find in many databases. So if people come with questions on other databases, I of course, I don't know all databases at the same level.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know quite well Postgres, Oracle, Yugabyte, but the others are similar in terms of indexes.
Cool.
So even I know that I will be virtual because I will not be in Salt Lake City. Are you also running it virtual?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so all the talks will be available online, and for those who go to Salt Lake City physical, I can also mention. So at KubeCon, um, we will have many colleagues there. I think we will have a booth,
Mhm.
and it's also the occasion to meet people. Let me check the talks and see what is about Yugabyte there. If I find the schedule, if I look for Yugabyte, and Dennis is there. So people who follow the community open hours know who is Denis Magda, because we started that with Denis, I think 2 years ago, and now he's working in another company, but he's still talking about Yugabyte at KubeCon. So that's really nice if you want to meet him. Anything else on your side you want to share, Brett?
Yeah, I guess, we don't want to take too much time away from Oscar, but we do have an initiative to migrate 100 well-known Postgres applications to YugabyteDB. This is something I've been working on intimately. I think currently we're 46 applications complete with migrations.
Uh-huh.
But this is something that the community is certainly able to get involved in. If you want to join our community Slack channel for this initiative, I would encourage people to do it. It's actually a pretty fun way to get different applications up and running on your machine that you might not think are open source, or you might think are too complicated to run locally, but you get to kind of understand the architecture of these applications. So we've migrated things like WordPress. I'm working on GitLab at the moment, which is something I'm sure a lot of people have heard of. So using YugabyteDB Voyager, we're able to migrate a lot of very well-known applications from Postgres to Yugabyte. So that's
And
just
it's
something I wanted
really
to
good
plug.
to test the latest features that are there to not only be compatible with the features but also the
Mhm.
performance. Yeah.
Exactly. We have a whole feedback loop going back to our engineering team and prioritizing fixes and support for different data type indexes and such. And it's pretty cool seeing the velocity in the engineering team shoring up any issues that we find and removing the need for workarounds when migrating to distributed SQL. So
Yeah. Okay. And then let's introduce our guest today. Let me bring Oskar to the stage. Hi, Oskar. How are you?
Hi, hi. I'm
I
good.
let
I'm
you
good.
introduce yourself quickly.
Sure, sure. So my running joke is that I'm earning money through consultancy and workshops for my open source passion. it's a partially joke but partially true. I'm indeed currently working mostly as an independent architect and consultant. My my biggest like pet peeve is the event sourcing and event driven architectures, but I'm also a huge fan of Postgres and I'm using it for years, and I also use it in a many very different ways, also as document database, as event store. And today I want to showcase one of those tools that I'm earning money for. Being able to build Pongo, which is like a Node.js library that allows to use Postgres, so also Yugabyte mm, as a document database. So in short, that's more or less my story. Of course, it's a bit longer. I'm in the IT space for like 17 years, so I did a lot of various and weird stuff.
That's really cool. And if people on the chat have experience about running documents on Postgres, like storing documents in JSON, accessing them through SQL or through Pongo or through FerretDB, there are more and more cases for that, because today you don't need a purpose-built database for each use case. You can do mostly everything in Postgres, and you can distribute it with Yugabyte. So if you are ready, you can share your screen and show, explain us and show a demo. I bring your screen to the stage. Here it is. And yeah, and I will just mention that if anyone has question on the chat, please put them, and we interrupt with question. The goal of the open hours is really to answer questions.
Yeah, definitely. I'm really curious your questions and thoughts. I will be trying to look during this discussion. I don't think that we should call it a webinar. See, this is not even a slide. This is just just
Perfect.
so yeah, so I'm encouraging also to ask questions, comments as we go. So we'll be talking about Pongo, and this is my humble drawing skills that made this logo. And I thought that, so Pongo is like Mongo, but on Postgres and with strong consistency, because I thought, like, if we have the choice, flexibility or consistency, why not to use both? And here, even with the Yugabyte, we could ask, like, but on Postgres and with strong consistency and scaling capabilities or being distributed. So why not have all? And so we will have later on discussion on why I decided to build this tool, but I would prefer to start to showcase you more about code. So how that actually works, how Pongo API looks like. I will be showing TypeScript code mostly, but I think and I hope that it will be understandable also for others interested people. So let me switch to the IDE. You should see the blank screen for now.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you see, I already started some Postgres instance on my Docker. We'll get back to that later. But the very first step that one need to do is to have some Node.js application at least briefly configured, and then you need to install this humble Node.js package. So the package works both with TypeScript and JavaScript. I will be using TypeScript because it can give you a bit more than JavaScript. We'll see that later. Yeah, so it's being installed. Yeah, fine. One is installed, so we can close it for now. So after we have that, then obviously the very first thing that we need to do is to import some code. So typically, if you're using Mongo client, then your entry point for all the connection stuff, etc., is the Mongo client. So Pongo exposes also, as you see, the Shim API, which with the intention to make it compatible with Mongo syntax. So it's not like, for instance, in FerretDB, where you can just change the connection string to and connect, but you need to change the package that you are actually using. So we'll discuss the trade-offs between that.
Because you have
yes.
no proxy, you have no driver, the library directly talks to the database.
Yes, that's correct. Okay, then maybe let's try to explain it. I thought that we'll do it later, but as we started, then let's try. So I heard on one conference recently the BBC architecture term. which is the block cylinder, box cylinder. So I will draw the typical BBC architecture. So let's say that we have here our Postgres or Yugabyte. Doesn't matter much. Here we have our application. And by application, I mean precisely the Node.js application. Because currently Pongo supports only Node.js. So somewhere here, you have your code, like your code that is running somewhere. And typically, if you would be using, instead of Postgres, if you had here like a MongoDB, then you would use the Mongo client, and through it you would connect it to the Mongo application. And with Pongo, it's quite similar, because you have here like the Pongo layer, which is this Mongo client that you see, or I will show you later the Pongo client called class. And what's happening here is that it takes the MongoDB API and translate it to the raw Postgres SQL. So there is no other tricks, just Pongo acts as a translation from the MongoDB syntax to the Postgres SQL. So the benefit of that is that you can plug it into your application. I want to make Pongo serverless friendly, so you don't need any other proxy, as you mentioned. So if you were using the FerretDB, then you actually couldn't have the BBC architecture. You would need to have BBBC. So box cylinder, because here the FerretDB is the most popular way of accessing the Postgres with the MongoDB API, because FerretDB acts as a proxy. It plugs directly into the Mongo protocol and then internally does translation into Postgres. So the benefit of using FerretDB is that you can use the same Mongo client as you are using. You can use MongoDB Compass and other tooling that are compatible with the Mongo syntax. However, you have this additional component that if you want to scale your application, then you also need to scale this part. And as we know, with such proxies, there is a risk that it can be like it has to be stateless, and those stateless services gives a bit more into the game and into the configuration. I'm not
configuration,
sure
and also it adds latency and context switches in the middle.
Yeah. The benefit is that if you have like a multiple like C#, Java, Node.js code, then it could be easier, because in Pongo, for now, you can just use Node.js. But here, as the Pongo is just a sneaky translation layer, then you scale your application in the same way as you would typically do. And here you can use Postgres, you can use Yugabyte. In the future, I'm also planning to add more storages, like maybe SQLite, to be able to run it on front end, because it also has this JSONB support. But that's a long shot. I don't want to spread my jam too thin. For now, I'm focusing on Postgres and Node.js. I think that there is a lot of things that can be done here in that space. Okay, so Frank, Brett, any other questions? Do you have some comments to that?
I think I will have questions after the demo.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, pretty clear for now.
Okay, great. Then, if someone was using the Mongo API, then that looks similar. you also need to provide the connection string. You need to create your database. I'm using the default Postgres database here. And instead of using the Mongo connection string, then I'm using my regular Postgres connection string. So this is the main difference besides using this shim API. So the benefit of using TypeScript is that, not surprisingly, we can define types. And based on that, we can get some hints. So for instance, if we try to access our newly set up DB, then in Mongo, we don't have tables, we have collections. So collections of documents, where each document means that represents a specific row. And you will see later on, but that's precisely how it works also in Pongo, because each collection is mapped to the table, and each row each document is actually a row in this table. So here, if we have these users, then we can perform some operations. So for instance, we could, So for instance, we could insert some user like this one. We could, of course, then use this inserted ID. And after that, we could update this user. So for instance, as we see here, as we are getting the typing, then we are getting also the IntelliSense. So as you can see, this is the very special MongoDB syntax, which for many people, it might look weird, but my main motivation behind creating Pongo is actually in the Node.js space. There are many people that are familiar with MongoDB syntax. And also in Node.js space, there is no standard for querying and manipulating the data. If we are in the Java land, then we have Java streams. If we are in .NET, we have Linku, expressions, etc. And here, either I would need to reinvent the wheel and define some syntax that people would need to learn. But I decided that because Mongo for many years was like the first database that was added to Node.js space, then my goal is to just reuse this mechanical memory of using the API. And in general, I think that actually it's pretty nice because it's quite flexible. So we could use, for instance, some other name. And we could also use there are also those granular updates like increment, and we can say that let's increment age by 3, and all of those operations will happen at once, and all of those operations will be translated into those small atomic updates without overriding and loading the whole document. So to be true, I don't like the MongoDB API in C# and Java. It's horrible, but actually here I think that it makes sense, at least for me. I hope that also for others.
I'm probably too much fan of SQL to like this syntax, but it looks like it's quite friendly with auto completion and that makes it efficient also.
Yeah, we'll get into the SQL. You'll see some SQL, so I promise you. Okay, so this is like a simple stuff: inserting, updating, finding. We could also do like get all users. So let's try to do it, and then I'm also using some pretty JSON to make it, not surprisingly, it a bit more pretty. Find, sorry. Okay. So there we have it. So let's try to run it and see if that works. That's always a really special moment. So cool. See, we are already having the SQL code because I added some also additional layers to print you what's happening behind the scenes. So I'm just defined that I would like to use the log level info. So actually show all logs, and pretty means that I'd like to have it a bit better visible. So the
That's really
first,
nice because it's also a way to learn SQL for people who are used to Mongo.
yeah, exactly. And to be true, that's also like people like me, because because one of the other reasons that I decided to choose this Mongo syntax is that I more or less fits into my head. And the JSON syntax that you'll see in a moment, it's one of those learnings that you are proud of yourself, and 2 weeks later you forget everything you learned. You realize that there is no learning anymore. So actually what's happening here is that in Mongo, I also like the accessibility part. So for instance, if you don't have collection, then on the first operation, so here with insert, it will try to set up the database. And that's the default behavior also for Pongo. We can disable that. I will show you that later on. But by default, it tries to create. And this is the default structure of the Pongo table. So it contains ID, which can be any text. By default, I'm using UUID v7. So it's internally, if you don't provide ID, then it's like a unique identifier based on timestamp to make it, properly indexed, etc. I mean, Frank, you're the index man here, so. But yeah, nothing special. Data is the key part here because I'm using the JSONB syntax. I will try to cover how JSONB works internally, but let's, for this moment, and I'm sure that you both with Brett know that, but the users might not know. Postgres allows you to store the JSON in two ways: as a regular text, so JSON data type, or JSONB, which is like a binary JSON, which is a special type of JSON. I will try to explain it later on. Then we have some other fields like metadata. Currently, I'm not using it. Partition. Partition will be used for using the Postgres partitioning, so which also plays well with the Yugabyte, I think, because with Yugabyte you can get this nice feature of distributing partitions between the nodes. I'm not sure, you could probably tell more about that. I'm not yet Yugabyte expert, but I mostly read about that in docs, but that looks pretty cool feature to me.
Yeah, we can distribute on the primary key, and then we can think about using this partition in the primary key, or maybe partitioning on top of it. I will look at it to see what's the best mapping to Yugabyte, and maybe it depends also on the size of the collection.
Yeah, because in general, this is the future concept that I plan to use, this native Postgres partitioning, so which allows to place data in different storage location, etc. And archived, created, updated, that's obviously the common table structure for metadata. And one more important thing is that, and a sneak peek to what I show later, is that I don't want to just repeat the Mongo on top of Postgres. I want to make Pongo a superset of features, because some decisions that were made in Mongo are fine for the distributed database, and especially distributed database built and designed a lot of years ago, quite a lot, but can be done differently, more efficiently in Postgres. So for instance, if you want to have optimistic concurrency, then with Mongo, you need to do retries and continuously retry until you see that the document has changed, which is, let's say, not the best user experience, not the best performance. So I want to do it differently. So this is like an auto-incremented version that you can use to check and ensure that you have consistent data. So that more or less how the table structure looks in Pongo. Then the first thing that we have is this insert user. And this is nothing special, because as you see, we are just inserting the JSON, which is just serialized, and the version, which, as I mentioned, is auto-incremented. And then comes the magical part, because we want to to make it compatible with Mongo. Mongo returns after each operation some additional metadata. So for instance, if we are updating, then how many records were matched, how many records were modified, etc. So to be able to do it, then I'm doing a bit more tricks. So I have this CTE that at first select the existing record or records if we are updating more than one. And then I'm just doing update based on the IDs that I got from here, because a record might not be updated because of the version mismatch. And here, this is this fabulous JSONB syntax. So, yeah, I mean, I know that there are people that like this syntax and that would prefer to still be able to use that syntax. And actually, for those type of people, let's copy this syntax. You can do it, actually, because instead of doing this, let's comment that out, I also provided something that is called in TypeScript the template literal, I think. Let's try to do it this way. Okay, what's not? I need to import that. So yeah. So now what I could do is that, for instance, instead of doing it like that, then here I'm just pasting the row, the row SQL. It cannot be more rower than that. But if I'd like to make it like, for instance, other name, to use some variable, let's say name, new name, then I'm also adding the basic tooling that would ensure that there is no SQL injection, etc. So you could paste it like that, and it will still work. Behind the scenes, it will do the proper mapping, add additional stuff, etc. And the same could be here, like, for instance, increment. So you could do it like that. Yeah, let me. Yeah, it's free. So sorry. So yeah, so you can do it this way. And what's more, if you prefer, then you could even do it the where statement precisely the same way. So you could do the SQL query like that. And you could do any type of query which will be placed in the where statement. So you can do like a partial operation. So this will be, we can try that. I'm not sure if that works.
I guess you could build your own little library on top of Pongo if you wanted
Yeah.
to do things in a particular manner, like you're showing.
Yes. Yeah, I think that what I need to do, yeah, this part, other name. Okay. So I would need to do it this way. I think it works like that. So it allows some formatting. Let me try. Sorry, not like that. I think it should be like plain string. Yeah, so if you want to do some magic, and if there are stuff that are not supported out of the box right now with Pongo, then you can always fall back and do your own preferred magic here in a way you'd like to do it. Yeah, let's try to do it again. If not, then yeah, I mean, it worked. See? So cool. So, I mean, one of the reasons why I built Pongo is that you don't need to do it this way, but if you want. And I have also a special mode, we can call it Franck mode.
That's the most SQL one.
Yeah, exactly. But for that, we need to switch from Mongo client to the regular Pongo client, which tells you precisely what is supported and what's not. So it has all the typing, etc. Yeah, let's fix it. Okay, this way. And here you don't see, this is one of the weirdness of Mongo. This always need to do to array. I decided that let's do it this way. And then if you're using the regular, this Pongo client, which is intentional that it's not looking like Mongo and it's not suffixed with shim, then it's still compatible with Mongo, but you get some additional stuff. Like, for instance, you can do command, and then you could do whatever you want here. So you could do like, let's say that we want to do the query and select all from users. Just to prove that it's a regular table. It will be, the data is a bit rawer than that. We need to use this magical SQL. Just to make this correct. And then okay. Let's do more typing. This is not Pongo, but the TypeScript weirdness. TypeScript is great, but the reason why it has types is that to be strongly typed. And if I'm trying to do a quick tricks to not make to bend to my needs, then after that it's misbehaving. I'm not sure why is it happening here, but yeah, let's fix it later. So if we have this data, then data is actually the row, it's the row table with some information. So we could try to print it just to show you what's there.
So is this mode like a pass through to the PG client, sort of, or?
Yes, exactly. Underneath, I'm using the Node Postgres layer, the regular one. So there is no Pongo is mostly doing this magical translation behind the scenes. It's using the Postgres pooling by default, but it can be changed. I will show you later. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's what it does. You could call it a sneaky Postgres client.
I wonder if we could create our own fork or version of this to run using the smart driver, Frank.
Yeah, I have even the issue for that, so you don't need to fork it.
Very cool.
We can work on that. There
I
is
like that
even
one.
I already added that to the
Very
GitHub
cool.
issue list.
Very cool.
Yeah, and then it will be transparent, connecting to the cluster and balancing the connections to the different nodes.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's already on my plate. But yeah, I'm happy to take contribution, etc. So yeah, we can discuss that.
Very nice.
How to make it work. So see, this is like a raw SQL and raw data that you can get. And if you'd like to just get only data, then sure, you can do it. Just select data and let's run it again. See, I promised that there will be SQL. So yeah, so then it's like a regular. So by that, if there is any limitation in Pongo API, because it's not fully Mongo compliant and might not be ever if I don't get sponsorship, because my goal is to just join those two words. So MongoDB API accessibility, muscle memory, and the Postgres capabilities, which you both mentioned, and that are together. So see, it's like you can do whatever you want. You can do joins, etc. So Brett, as you mentioned, Pongo driver, Postgres driver, then it's automatically actually installed this PG. The Postgres driver as a pure dependency. So in Node.js, it will be automatically installed and you can use it. So what you could do is like you could do like a PG client and create it, new PG client, and pass here the connection string. And once you do it, then you could put additional options and, for instance, use this PG client here, which is quite powerful in my opinion, because then you're telling Pongo, don't use the default connection pooling, don't open and manage connections on your own. I will handle that on my own, which means that if you're using any other tool like ORM or any tool that is compatible with this Postgres driver, then you could open connection here, and you could even just reuse it and change both in the same transaction data in Pongo with the regular database, which is the additional benefit of having Pongo as a library. Because if you have proxy, then you still have transactions, you can do batching, but you cannot join those two words. And that's maybe not the case that I would necessarily recommend to do on a daily basis. But sometimes you have your own internal tooling that is based on either raw Postgres driver or using some ORM, and it's useful to just be able to connect and handle that in the same transaction. And I also have this Dumbo, which is like internally, it's let's call it a pool. And Dumbo is my way to abstract the I think that I need to do it this way. Yeah. So Dumbo is like a database connector, simple database connector, which can handle stuff like connections, transactions, query execution. So it's used internally in Pongo, and it's used also in my other tool, the Emmet, which is the event store on top of Postgres. So it's like a shared dependency. And in the future, this Dumbo, the intention is to allow also other connectors, like for instance, your smart Yugabyte connector, or there is a PostgreSQL. Node.js land is crazy. You have like a multiple tooling for everything, but also in a long term gives the abstraction to use with Pongo for SQLite, etc. But if you're using Pongo, you don't need to know how the sausages are made. You can just do it this way. And yeah, so that's how the integration with database works in general.
I like this way where you can use it in this simpler way, which make it easy, but you can still go further if you have something special to do, or some workarounds, or temporary mixing codes and code from SQL and
super flexible.
Mongo.
Very cool.
Yeah, my goal behind Pongo is to make this tool accessible. So giving people safe defaults, like for instance, if you don't provide anything, then the connection pooling will be used. But for some cases like serverless, you don't want to use connection pooling.
Yep.
Then I want to also enable more advanced users, but without compromising the accessibility. So it's hard to join those two words, but that's what I'm trying at least to do.
So have you used this with any Next.js applications? I'm curious.
I didn't, but some people are use that already with Next.js, Svelte, and I think I saw Next, which is the Vue version of Next. Yeah.
I only mentioned that because you just touched on serverless applications, so you probably wouldn't want to. You would probably want to be managing connections a little bit more intimately in those environments. So
yes, exactly. I already verified that it can work with Cloudflare Hyperdrive, which is like a connection pool as a service, another proxy, and it works with that. So I definitely want to make it serverless friendly, because if I make it serverless friendly, then it will be also in general friendly.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So let me show you one more thing, or two more things. We still have time, right?
Yeah. We have 10 minutes, but we can go further. Huh?
Okay. I will try to make.
In all cases, it is recorded on YouTube, so if people have to go after at the end of the hour, they can.
We're not bored yet.
I'm happy. I'm happy that you don't. So I also added some. Let me start with this. Let's remove everything. So I also added some command line tooling, because I want to make it accessible and give people some options. So npx is the tool with in Node.js land that allows you to run the package that provides some CLI tooling. So you don't need to install it. It will happen behind the scenes. So you can, of course, use Pongo through the package JSON, but npx is like call CLI from this package. And here, as you see, the Pongo gives you some options. So let's try to go through that, because it can be also interesting. So let's try to generate config file. And I'm passing here that I would like to use in my code, I have to have the collection users and orders. So 2 collections. Ta-da, ta-da. Okay, so the file was created, and this file contains already the Pongo schema, which is the strongly typed version. It tells that I will have the database. I could give here the name if I'd like to. But if I don't provide it, then it will use just the default Postgres database. And it also provides some boilerplate for types. I don't need to keep them here, but let's do it like that. So I will remove it from here and just override this default one. And let me use that in my code. So yeah, so let's say like schema and user. Okay, type and schema. And this will be a bit of TypeScript magic, but then we'll get also back to SQL. So I can, besides this connection operations that you saw, I can also define the schema here, which I think that I'm missing something. Yeah. Okay. So let's name it config. So see, I'm just telling the Pongo client that, see, I will have such database, and this database will contain following collections, so following tables. So if I have it, then magically I'm getting also the strongly typed client, because I don't need to call this specific DB. I can see the TypeScript already generated me database. It's called the same as I name it here. So this is my database. I could call it, for instance, I don't know the name. Whatever we prefer here, the TypeScript will magically generate it like that. And then once we have this database, then why to use this syntax and force people to provide type every time and the name? We know it already, so we can do it this way. And this user is already strongly typed with all the benefits, etc. So we don't need to do anything more. But having the schema is not only for fancy TypeScript code. Of course, fancy TypeScript code is cool, but not that's not the only reason why I added that, because we can do additional stuff and call another comment from Pongo shell. So we'll use the migrate command. And let's try to, instead of run, let's start with the SQL, which in theory, we'll see, should not generate any tables, don't run anything. It's like a dry run that will show us what will be generated. So let's see if that works. So I provided connection string. I need to build my code first. Okay, because I need to generate this JS file. And because it is dry run, then I don't need connection string. Okay, something is not working. Maybe let's rename it to database. It's the first mishap, so it's still quite good. We are near the end of the webinar, so that's not too bad. Let's have a look again. Okay.
You are doing a lot of live coding and demos?
Yes.
Yeah, that's visible.
I know that one of the first rules that people tell you when you start doing presentation is never do live coding, but I'm not sure. Maybe I'm like a masochist or so. I don't know. Maybe it's like that. Okay, let's do it this way. So I regenerated the code. I'm not sure if that will compile. Not. So let's just quickly comment out code because it's not needed for now. For what I want to demonstrate you. Okay, now it's built. Finger crossed. And there are some benefits of showing your own code because you should in theory know it well. So you should be able to troubleshoot. See, quick, that worked. Yeah. Cool. Whew. Okay, so you need to believe me that I didn't do any voodoo stuff. But what I actually did is that I regenerated this config because probably I messed something. I don't know what. But again, it just tells that I will have those two collections. And then this Pongo migrate SQL command line tooling takes this config from the generated from this TypeScript and see what it does. At first it tries to create the migration tables, and then because all the migration will happen behind the scenes, so here, and will be added here, and then it also tries to set up those two tables. So I mean, it tells that if I run that, then eventually that's what will be created. So if you think that's correct, then we can try to run those migrations. Okay. Let's try to do it. Sounds like it worked out. Surprise. So at first it does the advisory log to just ensure that we don't have any other migrator running. Then it tries to create this migration stable. After that, it tries to check whether we already migrated this user stable. As you see, we did. This is the first run, so it tries to create it. Then inserts that, yeah, I actually ran it. And after that, it does the same for orders. So if we run it again, then in theory, we should not have those additional creation. See, it just tries to run migration. Then it ensures that the migration table is created. And this is especially for you because to be able to be compatible with Yugabyte, because I'm not using any those special Postgres meta tables. I'm just, this is the reason why I have here this create table if not exist, because I don't want to query those metadata to be able to be compatible with Yugabyte and
but
potential.
You can, we expose exactly the same catalog.
Okay. Then that's even great because that's what I heard, that there might be some stuff around it.
With Yugabyte, that should work because we expose the same catalog views. For the moment, we are Postgres 11 compatible. We will be Postgres 15 compatible soon. So maybe there are some changes. And one thing, for the moment, we don't have PG advisory lock. That's something we will put. But in many cases, it can be in your if you be careful and be sure that you don't have multiple migration at the same time.
And we can run the database by suppressing warnings with advisory locks now. That's a feature that was just added to suppress that issue. Also, I've seen numerous migration frameworks who seem to handle it the same way that you are here by creating this migrations table.
And that's why we add it. Initially, we didn't add it because it's not something that scales by definition because it's a lock for all session, but it's used a lot with migration, and this is why we will add it.
Yeah. So I can make that optional. So that's great. I will note it down and ensure that I will have the test for that with Yugabyte. So but yeah, still nothing spectacular happening, but it just showcased that the intention with the Pongo is to streamline the development. Of course, not by making it magical, because you can clearly just enable logging and precisely see what's happening. So it's not like a security by obscurity or accessibility by obscurity. So I still want to make that mechanical friendly, but I don't want people to immediately because selecting migration framework, etc., is something that people always do or always try to write on their own. So if they want to use the migration framework, then why not? They can print those SQL statements and even put it directly into the file. It's up to them. But if they just want to provide the business value, then let's just focus on that and just reuse what it's already available. So I promise this is one very last part. So not this one, not this comment. Sorry for that. But okay, let me just type it. Okay. And run the shell. So just to showcase the setuping Node.js framework, Node.js project and TypeScript can sometimes not be the easiest way for people that want to play, or trying and playing with the tool. If you have these additional steps that you ensure that you need to verify, it's always some additional burden. So to not force anyone to maybe. Okay. Sounds like I need to fix my camera, but a moment. So I will continue also talking. So that's surprising, but at least visible that we're live. So to give people a chance not to need to install anything, then I actually providing also the shell. So if you're running the Docker Compose, or you have your regular Yugabyte or some Postgres installation, then you can pass the connection string. So I could do it this way and pass. This is my default one that I'm running on Docker. But if you have access to your, for instance, your what did I did wrong? Connection sounds fair to me. Okay. Sounds like I'm not entirely consistent with the. So yeah, so you can pass here, or you can provide it through the in environment variable to be secure instead of showcasing. So you could provide here the connection string to, let's say, your Yugabyte installation and access it directly. And if you also provide these users, then by default you have the same even some basic IntelliSense, and you can use precisely the same API that we were doing using in our code. So there is already the database setup, and we could do, for instance, users, and then do the find. We need to await it. And see, if you print it, then you get all the information. I also enabled logging. If you don't want logging, then let's say set log level to error. And then if we run it again, then there is no SQL. Sorry, Frank. And what else? If you provided this parameter with collection, then you don't need to do this boilerplate. You can do it the same way. And the final part then I wanted to show is, I promised to tell how JSONB works, and I tried to make it quick, because here there is a special command that is changing how the results are displayed. And the results are displayed now in a way that they are displayed as a table. So we already saw that this is just a regular JSON. Nothing, even here, this is JSON. But here, I'm just taking all the information and put it into the table. And here, it's a happy scenario because we see that all data has the same schema. So let's try to insert a new
there
record.
is no nested object and arrays.
Yeah,
and...
yeah, we can. Let's add some array. Let's some array 1, 2. Let's do it this way, and let's add some other property that we didn't have. Yeah, and we can nested object.
I think you missed a quote next to the 2. I just don't want you to hit an error right now.
Let me just. Yeah, good. Thank you.
Sure.
So you weren't lying that you were listening and not both. Thanks for that. And I also need to do await. So in shell, there is some. Yeah, okay, it's inserted. Cool. See, this is the result, and let's now run it.
Wow.
Yeah. So now we see that in documents we can have data that doesn't always fulfill the same schema, but because all of the data doesn't need to have the same schema doesn't mean that it doesn't have schema. Because see, we could technically take all the properties that are available in all the records that we have and still keep it. And here, age, name, it's represented in most of them, version, ID also in all of them, but some additional stuff maybe only in some. But that's also the same case for regular relational data, because it may be or may not be available. So this is precisely how the JSONB works internally in Postgres, because Postgres keep it as a binary format that have the special field with headers. So all the information metadata about the schema, and then the rest can be treated as the tabular data. And because of that, if we have it, then we can also index it. And that's how gist or gene indexes works in Postgres, because they can just you can say like, okay, take me this name and index it. And of course, for most of the data, as we see here, it will be available. For some, don't. But that's the same case for any other Postgres columns, because we can have nullable fields. And of course, those indexing will be the most effective if the schema is similar or almost the same. If each record has different schema, then it won't be efficient. But Postgres, I saw some benchmarks. Of course, there are big lies and benchmarks, but I saw benchmarks that this JSONB indexing and querying can work even faster than MongoDB querying. So at least, of course, we don't need to trust those benchmarks, but at least it shows that at least it can be in a similar speed, maybe even faster. So which can be a good enough for most cases. Okay, I took almost 15 minutes too long. So
No,
that was really
we
nice.
appreciate it.
Yeah, and even if and the recording will be available on YouTube, and that's really interesting. I really like the two approaches and seeing tables, even if it's documents, and yeah, it's really good for developers, because the developers don't have to choose NoSQL or SQL. They choose what they know, and they can learn the other if they need.
Yeah, exactly. So my intention is not to say that MongoDB is a bad database, that people should not use it, but in many organizations, you can use either a relational database or relational database. And also many people just prefer to use Postgres, Yugabyte, and are more than fine. And for instance, they see that in the specific module, in all the modules, they would use the traditional tabular data, but in some modules, let's say that, okay, maybe it's better matching for this denormalized document-based information, or maybe we want to have the data that is fit for querying structure. Then typically read models should be denormalized. Maybe we don't want to do joins, etc. We could even take this JSON and stream it directly through the HTTP. So my intention on creating Pongo is to just give people more options and help people to use not so accessible the JSONB syntax, which can be fine, but not necessarily it is. I'm not sure if MongoDB for all people, I learned that not for all is better, but still, as you said, you can fall back to SQL and do whatever you prefer.
And it's also what we see a lot. It depends on the life cycle of the application. It's much easier to start the application with the Mongo API. The first use case, you just put documents. You don't know yet exactly what additional attributes you will need. You don't know exactly the volume. So it's good to start. And after some point, then you have some limitation, and you prefer more SQL. And rather than rewriting everything, you can just continue on what you have built with another API.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you're combining two products together. One is using Mongo and one is using SQL. Plus, we've seen with PG Vector, more and more functionality all within the Postgres ecosystem seems to be a pretty strong movement at the moment. So
you
have multiple different types of databases all within the same database.
Yeah, there is even I don't remember the name. It starts with A, the graph database in Postgres. So it's really shapeshifter. So yeah,
Apache AGE or
yes. That's what I meant. Yeah.
Very
so
cool.
I
So-
tested it this morning on Yugabyte, but they use the internal OIDs of Postgres that we don't have yet.
Mhm. You would have tested that this morning. That's funny. Very cool.
Yeah, because that's also something that the customer are asking for more and more use cases on the database. They start with plain SQL, and then they have some textures, then they have some documents, then some graph, and yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So what I'm showing here is that it's tested. Even Franck contributed to that to provide this basic Yugabyte config for Pongo, and so it's verified, and at least those basic features that I already verified are working well with Yugabyte, and I think that's a really good and really good matching between that, because then you also get this distribution and scalability, which I heard that quite a lot of people are saying that, okay, let's use Mongo because it gives us this shards, etc. But managing those shards with Mongo on production is, in my opinion, in my personal opinion, really, really hard. It's not that easy as it seems. So having a database that is more accessible in that manner and more familiar for people like Yugabyte, I think it gives even more options than traditional.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for all that, and it's something that will help users. And if anyone has questions about it on LinkedIn, on Twitter, we have also the community Slack. Do not hesitate. I see that we don't have questions, but we had a lot of people viewing, so probably questions will come later when they will try it.
Yeah, I don't think it's a lack of interest. I think you just did a good job explaining. So
I'm
thank you
always
very
afraid
much.
if there are no questions, but at least you ask a few, so I'm happy. And so thank you a lot for the invitation. It was a pleasure and a lot of fun. So I just added this single slide just in case someone wants to know how to reach to Pongo or to me. So
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Thank you very much. Have a
Thanks.
nice day or evening, everybody. And we will do another community open hours in 2 weeks. We will look at the topic. Thank you very much. Bye.
thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.